Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Are you ready to explore the unknown? Dive into the world of the strange, mysterious, and unexplained with EERIE Expeditions magazine. Each issue is packed with spine-tingling tales, cutting-edge paranormal investigations, and exclusive insights into hauntings, cryptids, UFOs, and more. Whether you're a seasoned investigator or just love a good ghost story, EERIE Expeditions magazine has something for you. Join our growing community of truth seekers and adventure lovers. Subscribe today at EERIEExpeditionsmagazine.com and unlock the secrets of the supernatural. Are you ready? That's EERIEExpeditionsmagazine.com, where the extraordinary is just a click away. Dare to discover.
What's out there? What creates the shadows in the corners or the creatures of the dark? Who are those on the other side? What do they have to say? This is the Gateway Podcast. This is not your normal style of paranormal talk radio. Brought to you live from United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM New Orleans.
Welcome to this episode of the Gateway Podcast, broadcast to you live from 107.7 FM New Orleans. I'm your host, C.L. Thomas. The weather in Vegas, it's been, get this guys, I know it's really, really hot across the entire country and possibly the world. It's only been in the 90s here. So it's a little bit too cold to even, well, for me it is. It's too cold to swim. So we've just been kind of cold. It's weird, right? But the rest of you guys seem like, it looks like you're all burning up. I don't know what's going on. It's supposed to be 110 here and it's only in the 90s. So I have an announcement to make before I kick off the show tonight. Our topic tonight, first of all, is about giants, if they're myth or reality. You guys decide. You're going to help us decide. And my guest, she's really good. I can't wait to get her on. But before I do that, a paranormal publishing company owned by Mike Rissicker picked up my work, Dancing with Demons, and he re-released it. So there's the second edition. It just came out today. And let me show you the cover. It looks great. Oh, I did the wrong one. There it is. There's the cover. And you're going to hear my dog barking. I'm really sorry. But yeah, that's the new cover. It just came out. It's available on Barnes & Noble, on Amazon, and on his own network. It's pretty great. So I'm pretty proud about that. So my guest, I'm really sorry. Someone is knocking on the door and I have no idea why. My guest tonight is Barbara DeLong. She is a lifelong seeker and spiritual explorer whose work spans podcasting, ministry, art, and authorship. She's really good with metaphysics. As a host of Nightlight Radio and creator of Cosmic Deck Initiation, she brings insight and inspiration to audiences worldwide, particularly of the paranormal. So tonight she's going to join me to discuss, sorry about that. She's going to discuss giants. Barbara, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Did you hear my dog being all loud?
Well, I'm waiting. My cat's going to start singing the song of her people anytime now, so don't worry about it.
I'm actually kind of having a really hard time with my dog right now. She's somewhat on hospice. But she has, like, today she's having a really good day because we changed her meds up last night. But what's happening is she's got hip dysplasia. And so some days she doesn't get up, other days she does. And she'll have these episodes where she just collapses. And that happened. She had a really bad one over the weekend. So we're just kind of playing out. But, you know, she's 13 and she's a golden. She's lived quite a long time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So before we get started in this, there's so much to talk about with this giant thing. But how did you get into metaphysics and the paranormal?
Oh, a UFO landed on my campus when I was in college. And when it took off, we were locked in the dorm. But when it took off, it swooped over my dorm and it blanked out the sky. So if it had had a VIN number, I could have read it. I was only a couple 100 feet away from it. And so that was my kind of introduction to there's something else out there. Prior to that, I had always been very intuitive, you know, not looking at you know, what do I do with this? Right? It's just that I knew things. And so after a while, I got into understanding that I was very gifted. And so I worked on developing that aspect for years and years, did documentaries, did radio shows, obviously, for 17 years, and wrote a book before Roswell with Ken Godsword. And so, you know, this is a field, the paranormal field, in, you know, totally including metaphysics, is something that I have been involved in for years. I taught school for 25 years and I've got 2 master's degrees, but and I'm an ordained minister as well. So, you know, it kind of steered me in a direction of trying to find out what is beneath the surface, what magic do we have inside of us, and what is the real truth about the evolution of the human spirit upon this planet? Because I don't think we've been told the truth.
Yes, I think there's a lot of cover-ups going on. I have to ask this just because you brought it up. You said a UFO went over your campus and
No,
you
landed.
on your campus.
Yes.
I'm going to have you back on the show to talk about that completely. But is there a connection between people with abilities and UFO connections?
Absolutely. One of the things when we were standing in the windows watching all this that I found fascinating was that some of the girls were screaming, some were hiding in closets. Why, I don't know. But they were hiding, they were screaming, they were running all over the place. I stood there thinking, is that not cool? You know, I really, and the girl next to me, standing right next to me, did not see it. So I do feel that there are certain people who are, for want of a better word, pre-programmed to be able to open up to things that do not seem natural, but actually really are very natural. And you know, everybody is psychic. But if you take it one step further and then further and further and further, and it's working on it, it's working through meditation, it's working through study, it's working through learning about all sorts of other things, that as you expose yourself to these things, they start to work within your life. So coincidences and synchronicities become more and more common. And so it's being more aware of what the hints that the spirit within us is actually telling us, and being aware of the fact that we carry a seed of the infinite, the source of all creation, within each and every one of us. And that means we can do miracles. It's a matter of getting rid of all of the garbage that teachers and parents and well-meaning folk have dumped into our consciousnesses, so that we have to let go of that and allow our higher consciousness to sort of blend with our reality so that we have a better perception as to the purpose of every lifetime and where it is we're going.
So the work we're about to discuss, most of it comes from your late husband
Yes.
on giants. And how did he get into giants, and what was his name?
His name was Patrick Cook, and he was actually very famous now over 20 years ago. He wrote the Bible UFO Connection, and it was one of the first books out there, and he was burned in effigy all over the place. It was really kind of fun. Well, not having him burning in effigy, but and as time went on, people like Giorgio and all of the other guys started to utilize his material. So he had a photographic memory, and he was very involved in UFOs in the Bible and what they meant and what their connection was. And of course, with his connection to the Bible, the giants were there. And he had an amazing website for years that was called Bible UFO Connection. He did a Matrix radio program that went on for years as well. But when he died, I couldn't keep up my website and his website, and I didn't want to lose his material. So I went through his website and made sure that everything on his website was either in one of his 3 books or I took it and I put it onto my website. And there were 2 areas that were not in his books. And one was the giants and the other was UFOs. So both of those sections are now on my website. And because of what I've seen, I'm very familiar with the UFO community. So it's sort of exciting that I'm able to now talk about that aspect of research and everything as well. But he did all the gathering of all of the material on UFOs and on giants. The gathering is all his material. But of course, because I was married to him, we did a lot of shows together. And so I became a lot more familiar about giants than I ever intended to, actually.
I was looking at some of the material that you got posted. There is quite a lot on the website, and I am going to play a couple of videos. One of them's posted on your website, and the other one's been posted on Ancient Aliens. So hopefully I don't get nicked for content copyright or anything like that. But your husband has uncovered like over 200 historical descriptions of giants from different regions. Is there a particular region or time period that we can look at that really deciphers if giants existed or not, or the evidence of giants?
Well, I think the one that has the most material would be the Bible. And, there are people that say the Bible is not actual, it's not truthful. There's no way of documenting a lot of it. But the reality is that the tribes of giants in the Bible were massive. It isn't just one little tribe. According to the Bible, the fallen angels mated with human women, and they brought forth the Nephilim, and God had to wipe the earth clean with the flood to get rid of the Nephilim. But he didn't get them all. So I think in the Bible it says there were giants in those days and after. And the reality is that the Nephilim, the giants, did survive the flood. And we have their bones all over Europe, all over the United States. They have been dug up just about everywhere. And the big thing, especially in this country, when farmers in the 1800s were digging them up, the big thing was, look, I can put the skull over my head. And then they used them as doorstops because they really weren't into archaeology in the 1800s as much as they are today. So a lot of the material has been lost. A lot of the bones have disappeared. Some say that there was a conspiracy with the Smithsonian, and yet the Smithsonian has documented many giants. So it's out there. And even the Native Americans, they have stories of the giants. Um, and you look at some of the really, really old stories, you'll find that they casually mention the fact that the giants were a part of their tribe. When the leader of, oh gosh, I don't know if it's North or South Korea, I forget which, but or China, but one of the leaders died, and when they had his thing for the son to be brought into power, they showed the lineup of the entire army, and it was thousands and thousands. And you see this man, 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 and then suddenly giant, and then man, 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 man. So the element of, I mean, there is a physical disability called giantism, but there are actual giants out there.
I was going to ask you, is there a difference between giantism and the traits of giants?
I believe so. One is, well, maybe not. I don't really know. Giantism is a genetic deformity, supposedly, but giants are so prevalent that one would be suspectful of the fact that perhaps they are an ancestor or a different branch of our species that has gone extinct at the moment. But that branch still exists because there are people still born with, and the Bible described it, with double rows of teeth, extra digits on their hands and their feet, and either light or red hair. And we see that all over the place. And as I spoke with you earlier, I had somebody that worked with me on my radio show, and her entire family had the extra digits, the extra rows of teeth, and they were very healthy looking. They weren't giants, but they had all of the other qualities. So one has to ask, is it possibly in the DNA someplace that every now and then pops up? Her family had it. I mean, it was almost everyone born into that family had those features.
That's really interesting. Why were they seen as evil back in the day? Or why did God have to wipe them out?
Well, according to the Bible, many things happen. It depends on which Bible story you want to listen to. In the Bible, it talks about how the giants were born, and they ate their parents out of house and home, and then they ate everybody else's house and home out, and then they started to be cannibals. So that's one story. Another story is that the giants formed tribes, and they were huge and they were powerful. The Canaanites were giants, and there were many tribes. I mean, in the Bible, it talks about the tribes of giants and the wars of the tribes of giants. They were intelligent. They were not drooling, stumbling, stupid people. They were very, very intelligent. So that our concept of what a giant is, like, Jack and the Beanstalk and Fee Fi Fo Fum, that's not the kind of giants we're talking about. We're talking about very intelligent, powerful people. And there was a flood. And according to the Bible, God caused the flood to wipe out the Nephilim, which would be the giants. And not all the giants were killed, so that they continued to breed. And there are giants out there to this day.
And they dig these things up all over the world, don't they?
Everywhere. Europe, definitely. South America, some. I know here in the United States, there have been a lot of them, especially in the Ohio Valley. Lately, I've had somebody on the show that talks of the giants that were in the mounds, that they have discovered that they were part of the communities, so that they weren't a separate race. They were intermingled into whatever culture they were living in. They just had, and to me, that's saying it has to be genetic.
Right. Except for one culture. I do have a little short video of the Lovelock giants. I don't know if you know much about the story with the Native Americans here in Nevada that you can comment on.
Oh, yeah. The red-haired giants.
Mm-hmm.
Theirs is a kind of neat story. They were double rows of teeth, extra digits, tall, red haired, and it was a part of their history. You know, they talked of it,
Right.
and there were people that were farming guano, bat dung, and there was a cave, and they started to excavate that cave. And as they excavated, they came out with tools, and they came out with finally with bones that were giant bones. And the story went that they were trying the tribe was trying to get rid of these giants, so they herded them into a cave, set a fire, and didn't let them out. So they all died in the cave, and then the bat guano covered them for centuries until the guano farmers went in to get them. And I saw an interview with a woman who had a piece of this, I think, the skin and the hair of the red-haired giants that she had as part of her formal dress that had come down through her family. So
Wow.
it wasn't that long ago that they did this.
Would it be okay if I played this little video clip?
Sure.
Okay. So that's the clip from Lovelock. And the reason why I wanted to show that was because it's exactly what you guys were saying about, well, they didn't go into like the red hair or anything like that, but they go into like these giant skulls and the difference between their jaws compared to a regular human. There's another clip that's on your website from another cave. Can you talk about that?
That's from the Brighton Wiener Cave in Bavaria, and that cave. The report on that cave is from 1500, and apparently the townspeople had discovered it, and the townspeople went to investigate it, and the report that the townspeople wrote up is still on file in Brighton Wiener. So it's about as documented as you can possibly get. And it does talk about bones, and it does talk about giants, and it does talk about, at one point they said that they had to move bones out of the way so that they could make room for themselves in one of these chambers. And it sounds phenomenal. And, you know, you think, yeah, but could that still exist? Well, it did. And it was rediscovered, so to speak, after World War II, because in an area that had been used as a concentration camp, and there was a young soldier. His first name was Danny. I can't remember his last name. And he and friends, the area that the cave was in was where they were doing practice bombing, and it appears that they had to sort of break in, so they did this on the sly. And he was worried after a while that he was going to get in trouble with the army. But they did go into the cave, and one of the things they found fascinating was that, first of all, it's already been trashed. It was trashed earlier when another explorer went in and found that everything had been destroyed. But Danny and his friend went in, and they went down a cave into a tunnel, and on the side of the tunnel were walls that weren't all the way to the ceiling. And when they looked into what was beyond these half walls, it was all bones. It was full of bones. And Danny was concerned that perhaps these were survivals of the concentration camp, and their relatives should be notified and things like that. I don't think that was ever the case, but Danny did come out with some bones that he brought out. They were documented as being giant bones. So, and unfortunately, I've lost contact with him, but I think he still has the bones and the reports.
Wow. Should I play that clip?
Sure.
I'll try to cue this up. I have it queued to about here, so I don't know how much to play of that one.
I don't either. It's good luck.
We'll see what we
They
get.
make a historical mass grave site like this, block it off, and then make the whole area a live fire range.
What happened to the German people that used to live here?
They were displaced. Most of the town populations that were out there, like Coon and Kittens, those are all named after real towns. And from what I read online and stuff, I guess most of the population was Jewish. Now, I mean, so these could be Jewish people, these could be people from the medieval times. They could be American and British POWs that were held here by the Wehrmacht. Who knows? But one thing I do know is that a bunch of farmers didn't pay for those gates out there, barring the cave. I'm sure it was one of the governments that did. And I don't know.
Seriously, you want to say something fast?
No, it's just totally it's amazing. Everything we've seen so far, and we walked through it, it's just impressive because there's bones everywhere. The caves are just forming in different ways. It's just amazing. It's just can't really say anything. It's awesome.
We should take this picture quick. Go for it. Can you get close to the bones? Get some more shot. There you go.
Okay. We are, I believe, at the bottom of the cave. There's, at the bottom of the cave, there's this huge mound of this clay-like material and lots of bones, as you can see here. Lots and lots and lots of bones. Well, an interesting find. Originally, I started to believe that this was prehistoric. But then I found this. I don't know if you can see it in the camera.
Yeah.
It is wire. So why would there be wire with these bones, this big site of clay, everything like that? Well, it rules out it being, prehistoric, or it rules out it being from Italy. It's just gotta be a lot nearer than that. And here's what I can tell. It looks like it's like some type of copper wire or some type of, I don't know. But it's metal wire. So maybe somebody came by once a time and have to drop wire here, but I certainly doubt it. I don't know. Or maybe I'm just a conspiracy nut. Who knows? So.
Was your Dr. Pep or Diet Coke?
Good. This mass grave is brought to you by Diet Coke.
I think the other cave that is worth talking about, even though it's been debunked and called a fraud, it's not, is Kincaid's Cave in the Grand Canyon. Are you familiar with that one?
I am not.
Ooh.
Not. Tell us about it.
Kincaid's Cave was discovered by King Cave, who was paid by, I believe, the Smithsonian to go down the river that runs through. And he, at one point, saw this cave and he went up into it, and in it were statues and bones and mummies. So he went back and reported what he found. And apparently there was an expedition that went and collected most of the stuff. It's hard to get into. And it was it was debunked and called a fraud. However, Scott Walter tried to get into it, so did Josh Gates. They have made it impossible for anybody to rappel into them. The cave is on a no-fly zone, so a helicopter can't go in and look.
It's interesting.
Because they say the condors are nesting there, which is bull. But the material that was in the cave was spoken of, and it was very Egyptian. And what makes one wonder is that all of the mountains around there have Egyptian names. There's a great deal of Egyptian language thrown around in that particular area. And the thought might have been at one time the river did come to the mouth of the cave. And over time, it's down to the point now where the climb up to it is as dangerous as the rappel down to it. But it appears that there was something there that was really quite profound. And yet they're calling it a fraud, but then often they call things that they can't explain and they want people to not pay attention to our frauds. But check out Kincaid's Cave. It's quite interesting. And unfortunately, the newspaper article came out on April 1st. So people are saying, oh, it was an April 1st joke. And
Right.
Don't think so. Don't think so.
Joe Fox has a question. I think he's asking, did the giants practice cannibalism?
That would be probably in biblical times. That's when they were said to have done that, and that's why God wanted to destroy them. Now, I don't know that they did, but that was one of the reasons why they say that God felt that they needed to be destroyed.
Interesting.
I can't speak to that. I just know that I had Gary Wayne on my show. He wrote the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. And we did a whole series of shows on that book. And one of them had to do with the giant wars. And it spoke of how intelligent these men were and how amazing they were as far as architecture and being able to build massive buildings and things like that. So I think that cannibalism is something that was talked of, but it was not one of the major things. They just threw that in, I think, to make them seem even worse than they were.
Were these giants, do you think they were responsible for building some of the things that we see in the ancient world, that there's no way we could have done that without modern equipment of some sort, like the Egyptian pyramids and some of these larger structures? Yeah, Stonehenge. There's one in Peru. They're all over the world.
Yeah, and the giants were too, because they are definitely all over the Ohio Valley. So that in most of the communities that had mounds, and you look at Monk's Mound and what it would have taken to build Monk's Mound with all the different layers of different soil and everything, it would make sense that some people with greater strength were involved. And then you also get into the fact that sometimes they even talk about the Tuatha De Danann being part of this whole policy of this whole fabric of creating massive structures and things like that. So, and they go way back. They predate the Druids.
You mentioned that the thousands of skeletons were hidden or ignored, or institutions. You mentioned the Smithsonian trying to cover this up in mainstream. Why does...
Let me silence this. Or try to. I try very hard to turn everything off, and I don't do well.
It's all right. What is your take on mainstream academia, and why do they continue to cover up the evidence of giants?
Archaeologists throughout time have always had this publish or perish. And you can't be wrong, because if you're wrong, there goes your career. So those who ran the Smithsonian had a certain theory as to the time frame and how evolution happened, and there are thoughts, they've been accused of destroying evidence. They may or may not have. Maybe they've stored it where we can't find it. I don't know, but they do have bones on display. They do admit that there were giants, and at this point in time, they kind of have to. with what's going on with the world and all of the research that's been done and the carbon dating and all of that. They can put these giants in different time frames. But there was, quite a while back, a theory that the Smithsonian took all of the bones and took them out into the middle of the Atlantic and dumped them. I don't think they did that, but I do think they didn't want to make a big deal of it because it did conflict with what their theory of evolution was and Darwin and everything. And they didn't want to have to figure in these huge bones that didn't fit into what everybody was saying. Yes, this is how evolution happened.
Right. That totally makes sense. And in relation to that, I saw somewhere in your research with your work, you referenced Saint Christopher being depicted as a giant in Eastern Orthodox tradition. Why do you think the Catholic Church removed or downplayed this element of his story?
Well, theoretically, at one point, he carried Jesus across the sea, a big piece of water, anyhow. There definitely have been suggestions that a lot of the biblical characters that we talk about were giants. And, I think they're trying to play down the fact that giants are really part of the evolutionary process that we've been through. St. Christopher is one of those that was definitely thought to be a giant. We have the bones all over the place. It proves giants did exist.
And we have the structures everywhere.
We have the structures.
Somebody moved.
I don't know about the Great Pyramid. My personal belief is the Great Pyramid was there before the last ice age, so that it's a civilization that we just know nothing about, and I don't know who built it, or if there were humans at that time frame, or if there were giants. That's something that I'm not sure we're ever going to really figure out, but it would be cool.
I've always heard that they were a civilization that were sky people at one point that came here, and the ancient Egyptians actually stumbled upon the pyramids, and it was like agent to them.
Well, if you look in India, the Nagas, their gods lived in the sky and flew in their vimanas, and so there's so much that's not written that people assumed everybody knew, and after 100 generations or so, nobody knows. So I would say that the Great Pyramid, especially because that there's never been a mummy in it. There's no decoration in it. It looks more like a power plant than anything else.
That's really strange. This is a really it's a strange topic because these giant beings, everyone thinks that the story is that they've come down from the sky as angels. They mated with humans, and that they're a byproduct of the Nephilim.
The Nephilim, the giants didn't come down. Angels came down.
Okay.
Angels, if you stop and think about a giant and 12 feet high and a normal, female 5'5", 5'8", that's not going to happen.
No.
So theoretically, according to Bible and whatever, angels could take on whatever form, whatever sex they wanted to. So they would morph into appropriate size, and that the babies born, were giants. Quite often, the woman didn't survive the birth because the baby was a giant. Now, those that did survive, the giant grew and would horrify me if I'd had a giant. You don't maybe know it's a giant to begin with, but at 12 years old, when they're 12 feet high, you suspect something's wrong. And that's what happened. But there were places where women were theoretically just bred to create Nephilim, so that, and they did not survive. They did not survive. The woman didn't survive birth, and at one place they talk about the fact that the child, when it's born, is already walking. So it's different. It's a different species.
Well, is it fair to say that they had godlike qualities to them? Like they had supernatural powers, or?
Well, they were half angelic. So yes, they definitely had. They were part angel, part human. So they had a lot of the qualities that the angels would have. They were able to die, but no, I come to think of it, yeah, they were able to die because the flood supposedly wiped them out. But angels couldn't die. Angels had to be bound and thrown into Gehenna or the deep, or whatever you want to call it, until the final whatever. But angels don't die, but the Nephilim did.
I forgot where I was going with that. I was going to take it a step further, but I forgot where I was going to go with that. I'm really sorry.
That's okay.
But it's just, the whole thing is just fascinating to me, because you have these beings. Do you think that they advanced civilization as we are now in some way? Like, did they help us in the past to advance?
Oh, absolutely. The giants themselves we're talking, again, we're not talking about drooling, stupid things. We're talking something that's half angelic. They were brilliant. They knew mathematics. They knew, I had Fritz Zimmerman on the show a week ago, and he was talking about how these giants, they knew about the Pythagorean theory before Pythagoras did. They knew about pi. They knew about construction. They knew about fire. They knew about melting irons and creating steel and creating, different things. They brought a tremendous amount of knowledge to humanity that theoretically God didn't want shared.
Do we know what that information is?
Well, part of it was fire, among other things. We got fire from them. Of course, lightning gives us fire too. I mean, but they gave us a lot of the mathematics and the astrology and astronomy. And I mean, when you look at the temples in South America, they were looking at the skies. They were charting the stars. They had to learn that someplace. They didn't just pick it up on their own. They were taught it. And possibly it was the giants that shared that information with them.
What do you think that it would take for academia today to take giants seriously?
I think they're beginning to. They have to. At some point, they're saying that it may have been a different species that is, become extinct. Yet there's still people that are giants that are being born today that they don't live long and prosper, because it's hard for them in this culture to be able to support themselves or live. But that I think it's in our DNA. I think that aspect is carried there. And like I said, that friend of mine that worked with me, her whole family had the red hair, had the double rows of teeth, had the extra digits. They, it ran true in her whole family.
Here's something interesting on your website. You say that in New York, there's a land of giants and ancient ruins.
Well, it's underwater, I believe. as well. I know I wrote it, but I wrote it a very long time ago.
Too long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any crossover between spiritualism today in metaphysics and things like that and the giants, that race of giants in humans?
I don't know if there's that as much as we are beginning to realize that the ancient Greeks and Romans were into material that we're now going into today that we're thinking is also it's new age, but it's the oldest time. They had dream temples and dream interpretation that they used it, constantly. It was a part of life. Meditation was a part of life. There were a lot of things done way, 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 way back that are becoming rediscovered today and, touted as, oh, this is wonderful. And this is new magic. And no, it's not new magic. It's old magic we're remembering. The aspect of, my gosh, there are people who can meditate and you don't need to use anesthetic for them. Depending on how much you want to put into developing your own skills and talents, it's amazing how far you can actually go. Now we've got medicines that'll knock you out. You don't have to meditate to do it. But back then, that was your only option, and you paid more attention to being one with nature. Early Indians walked barefoot on the earth, and they had fewer cases of illness or even arthritis because they were synchronized with the heartbeat of the earth. They have a new school called earthing, and they suggest that you walk barefoot on the ground for a certain amount of time every day to synchronize yourself with the earth to become healthier, because we have isolated ourselves from the heartbeat of the earth by wearing shoes, by asphalt, by wood, by construction. And so we're taking ourselves away from the natural aspects that can give us greater health. And so it's I think maybe it's cyclic. Maybe we discover it and then forget it and then rediscover it as the generations go.
Where do you see all of this is going? The more we uncover our past, so you say, or remembering what we were and what we knew back then, is this going to lead us into a better culture?
I'd like to say yes. We have wondrous
Not
things.
looking at today's, not looking at what's going on today, but
Astrologically speaking, Philip Lindsay has this wonderful theory of we go through different ages, and at the end of every age, there's a mass extinction almost, and we start again, and we go from a golden age to an Aryan age, and that's where we are now. We're at the bottom age, humanity is, and so that according to his theory, there will be an almost mass extinction at some point in time where we go back to square one and we start living. I mean, if you stop and look, when we were all one continent, when we were Pangea, we talked one language, we lived as a whole. There were no cities or countries or anything. We were one people, and we took care of each other and we bartered. And then the place shifted. We became separate. Separate languages took over. Separate cultures took over. Environmental things changed us. And we lost contact with the wholeness that we are. I mean, it's called a human race. We are a species, no matter what color we are and no matter what language we speak. If you take away the outer skin, you can't tell anybody, you can't tell one race from another. So that we've become so isolated that I don't see how. I mean, we're trying to impose peace on certain aspects of our world. You can't impose peace. Peace comes from within.
Right.
You can force something, but ultimately there's going to be anger and bitterness and then explosions again. So we've forgotten that we are brothers and sisters. And we're going to be reminded one way or another, whether it's an asteroid or a comet or an ice age or ice, melting and swallowing all of the land mass up so that we're all forced together again. I don't know what it's going to be, but something's going to happen. Are we destined to be one race? Absolutely. Are we there? Oh, you got to be kidding.
Not even close.
No.
Not yet. Well, Barbara, we only have a few more minutes, so can you tell us about your work, where we can find you, and what you have right now going on?
Well, my radio show is Nightlight Radio, and I interview authors on all topics of books that are within my field, so to speak. And the website is barbaradelong.com. It has a ton of information. It's got, I think, 400 or 500 pages of material on it. People can get lost in it. I am still writing books. I developed the Cosmic Deck of Initiation, which is a deck of oracle cards that are hand-painted mandalas that I painted that provide a spiritual guide for one's evolution through a lifetime. And so it's not tarot. It's nothing like tarot. It's a spiritual development deck. And I do free readings that stream live on the second and fourth Thursday of the month, and people can come into those shows and get a free reading from the it's not a chat room, it's from the comments section. And I'm 81 and I'm still figuring out new things to do. You
certainly don't even look close to 81.
Trust me, I stand
great.
up. I'm 81.
Well, Barbara, thank you so much for taking the time and come talk to me about giants. I really appreciate it. It was fun having you on the air.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you. And you've been listening to the Gateway Podcast, broadcast live from United Radio 107.7 FM New Orleans. Until next time, coming up next week, let me check a look at the schedule real quick. I never have it pulled up, Oh, yeah. So next week is going to be about becoming a goddess. I have another writer coming on, and it's going to be about the code to a modern goddess. That's what it is. Secret code of modern goddess. So stay tuned for that. Until next time.